Hello everybody. I thought I would walk you through a much more complex truth table. And most of the ones you run into are not going to be this complex, but the main thing to note is that as soon as you can do all the operators, as soon as you can do the or the disjunction, the conjunction, the conditional, biconditional, and so forth, the negation, as soon as you can do that, you can really do a truth table of any complexity so long as you get the order of operations right. So the way that students tend to make mistakes with these is that they'll fill out a bunch of T's and F's and they'll get the wrong column, or they'll get confused about the order to do things in. So that's why we're stepping through here. So what's really making it complex is that you have the outer parentheses, and then you have an inner set of parentheses, and you have these outer parentheses, and then two sets of inner parentheses, so one there and one there. So we'll be walking through how to do that. As always, the setup involves filling in the T's and F's for the atomic propositions. The last atomic proposition should always go TF, TF, TF. And then the leftmost should be the most T's in a row and the most F's in a row, and go downwards from there. So here we have 4, then 2, then 1. Okay, the next thing to do, and it's really easy if you're on a word processor, is you just copy and paste in the values for all the atomic sentences. So that's all I'm doing here. I'm just pasting in the values for P. Make sure that you copy them. So I'm copying from Q now. Paste in the values for Q. I think we only have 2 Q's. Yes, 2 Q's. Then the R's, 2 R's, and there we go. Those are all of our atomic sentence values in. Next thing we want to do is we want to find our main logical operator. The main logical operator is the operator that is outside the most parentheses. So it is the outermost operator. And if there's a tie, then it is the one that is not the negation. Here we don't have a negation, but this is the one that is the most outer. And so I'm just going to highlight that so you see it. It just sort of makes things neater. Again, that's not something you have to do, but it might help you. All right. Now here's where students get confused. They'll look at this whole thing and not know where to start. Where you start is basically the opposite of the main logical operator. You want to figure out what it is you need to figure out first before you can figure out the later things. So you're going inside as many parentheses as possible and figuring things out that way. So here we have the outer parentheses, then we have the inner parentheses, and so this is what we'll be figuring out. The same is true with, we have these outer parentheses, and for these inner ones, again, figure out this one. Now for these inner ones, it's a little different, and that's because in order to figure out the conjunction, I first need to figure out the negation, because it's saying not P or Q is, I'm sorry, not P and Q is true. So in order to know that, I first need to know not P, and then I could tell if they're both true. So it'll actually be this one, and then this one. All right, that said, it's just straightforward. As long as you know your truth tables for this disjunction, you shouldn't have any trouble filling these out. A disjunction is only false if both sides are false. So as soon as you see a true on either side, you know that the disjunction is true because it's saying one is true or the other. So here they're both true. Oops, for some reason that's faint. Let me make this darker. Bingo, there we go. Okay, so this is a disjunction. Both are true, so it's true. Both are true, so it's true. Here we still have one true, so it's true. Here we have one true over here, so it is true, and true, and true. Here they are both false, and it's false. And here they are both false, and it's false. Now the next thing you want to do, and I would not recommend skipping this step, is do something to mark the ones that you just used as having been used, so you don't get confused with them when you go to evaluate this column. So what I'm doing here for the sake of the video is just making it grayed out, a fainter color. All right, let's go ahead and do this one. As we mentioned, in order to do this one, first we need to know what's in this column, and then we can figure out this column. This is a negation, so that means that we just take the opposite values of whatever's being negated. So it is true when P is false, and false when P is true. So this would be false, 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 true, 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 and true. And again, it is worth graying these out so we don't get confused. So now I know that when I go to figure out this one, I'm looking at this value and not accidentally looking at that value. Okay, so this is a conjunction. It is only true if both sides are true. So as soon as you see a false on either side, you know it's false. Here we have a false on the left, false. Here they're both false, so it's false, false. Aha, here they're both true, so we can say true. Here they're both true, so we must say true. Then false and false because of the falses over here. And once again, we want to gray these out. And now we know the value of this conjunction. Okay, we have one more conjunction. Again, the conjunction's only true if both sides are true. So I'll just do this quickly. True, false, 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 and false. And we will gray these out. Okay, congratulations. We've done the innermost parentheses. Now we got to go to one step outwards. So we're going to do the stuff within these parentheses. We have a conjunction again. The conjunction is only true if both sides are true. And here's why I gray things out. Again, you don't want to look at this value, because notice this value is different from this value. You want to look at the value for the whole thing in those parentheses there. So here both sides are true. Here one side's false, so it's false. They're both true. One side's false, so it's false. They're both true, so it's true. False, false, and false. And then again, it is worth graying these out. All right. Now for the right side, this is a disjunction, so it is only false if both sides are false. So here we have a true over here, so it's true. Here they're both false, so it's false. True, false, true, true, false, and false. Okay. Now we want to gray these out. Now finally, we look at our main logical operator. It is a conditional. If you recall, this is called the antecedent, and this part's called the consequent. And now we have the values both for the antecedent, which are here, and for the consequent. And if you remember your truth table for the conditional, it is only false when the antecedent is true and the the consequent is false. So only if we have a T on this side and an F on this side will it be false. So here they're both true, so it is true. Here the first part's false, the antecedent's false, so it's always going to be true. Oops, sorry about that. So it's always going to be true. Here they're both true, so it's going to be true. Here the antecedent's false, so it must be true. Here the antecedent's true, so we have to check and see if the consequent's true. It is, so it's true. Here the antecedent's false, the whole thing's true. Same thing here, and same thing here. And if we want, we could gray these out too. We really don't need to because we're done with the table now. And this is our final set of values. One thing you might have noticed is that they are all true here. I did that on purpose to show you what a tautology looks like. A tautology is a necessarily true statement. So under all interpretations, this is true. You can also have contradictions, in which case under all interpretations it's false, but most of them you'll have a mixture of true and false values, and that's called contingent. And what that means is some interpretations, each row is an interpretation, and some interpretations will be true and some will be false. But in this case we have a tautology because they're all true. So as long as you work through step by step, you should be just fine. The main thing is just figuring out what the next step is to do, and of course to know what all the basic rules are for the operators. As always, I hope that you ask me questions in email or in raised hands. I hope this helped, and I will talk to you later.